on our thing. Wasn't we didn't go into that as much. Should I do both of these now?
Yeah, I can do them.
Okay, thank you.
So the concrete resolution coming out of the discussion was some of the campaigns we need at the provincial level would include know your rights campaigns for drug users about policing, drug laws, sex work, homelessness, other issues. Campaigns that highlight women who use drugs' particular experience, especially relating to children and child apprehension. And a campaign for an ombudsperson for the rights of people who use drugs, who could see through complaints on police, hospitals, welfare, because as you guys know, there's supposed complaint processes for all these institutions, but they're all a load of bullshit, and if you don't have a lawyer and you're not gonna see through, you can't call every week and follow up on them, your complaint is really gonna go nowhere. So the idea is to have an ombudsperson who would be a provincial person who you would call, who would be a human being who isn't the police that you could talk to about the police or the hospitals or welfare, and they would help you go through a proper complaint process, ideally to some kind of a remedy in terms of how the system is running. So those were the ideas for the campaigns, and then the action plan was which we kind of talked about in our very brief, exhausted meeting after yesterday, is to request Pivot to produce or reproduce all of the Know Your Rights materials and cards that they have and make those available for distribution to all of the drug user groups throughout the province, so that could be a resource that as soon as you have a group, it could even be just an individual, you let Pivot know you need these resources to help with your organizing, and they send you the Know Your Rights materials. To strike a women's committee for the BC YUKON Association of Drug War Survivors to develop analysis and campaigns, and to develop the demand over the next year for the position of an ombudsperson and to present the demand to the provincial government.
An ombudsperson for us?
Yeah, an ombudsperson for people who
specifically.
use drugs.
So there's like an 800 number, if you can try and envision it, that you'd call an 800 number, the person would actually be there and in a warm and friendly way, listen to your whole story. Because what we're finding is, when you have a problem with Abbotsford emergency and in the hospital there, you're just gonna have 20 more people telling you the exact same problem, because we need someone to actually take action on these things. And these aren't, people don't feel well, these people die. So you know what I mean, like these violations of human rights. Go ahead.
Isn't BC 211 going to be doing that at the beginning of the new year?
BC 211?
They're going to be doing, it's going to be a phone line you can call that'll be available 24/7 for people that have opioid or addiction issues, for people that need medical, psychiatric issues, all that stuff. In the beginning of the new year, it's just going to be dialed 211 and boom.
And you think that they would take action and remedy these kinds of complaints?
They're going to help you get to the appropriate people that'll be able to take that kind of action.
So for people,
Detox centers, that's where all that's being shown, we gotta get to. It's called access.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit different from what we're talking about. So thanks for sharing that information. It's a little bit different in the sense that we're talking about when somebody has a horrible experience with the system, they can call someone who's actually going to listen to them and hear them out and try to figure out how to make a complaint and, be the squeaky wheel within the, the person who won't shut up about the shit that people are taking. That's the idea for this ombudsperson position.
I just want to say that
louder. I'm talking about the municipal jails that won't give you your methadone, but any of the bullshit that's going on. And it goes on and on and on. Needle exchanges that won't give out needles. Overdose prevention sites that bar people.
Yeah, so there's lots of work for that ombudsperson potentially to do. What we need to do is we need to get any feedback on this resolution, if there is any discussion, like further discussion about what should actually go in the resolution. And then we need to have a member from the floor move it, and we need to vote on it so that we can have a process and move it. We've got 4 more of these, so I'm sorry for being a jerk about trying to move us along, but we need to cover a lot of ground.
We were told, right, we had nothing dose, right? They said, dose higher, nothing dose, that's bullshit.
Judy Darcy and the CEO of the BC CDC, I write letters like a fucking mental case. I almost never get replies and I never see action on it. So, you know, if your welfare can actually kill you by cutting you off your opiates, OAT or whatever everyone's calling it now, they change it every fucking year. But anyway, so the, you know, you're on an opiate prescription program of some kind. If they can cut you off welfare and cut you off of your programming, they basically can kill you. It's bullshit. It has to be remedied. People go, oh, well, no one ever does this. It's okay for them to write it on. I go, no, it's not okay for them to write it on. And who doesn't sign their welfare agreement no matter what the fuck it says? You need to pay your rent next month and you need your welfare check.
So the idea is this would be an ombudsperson for people who use drugs, and you're absolutely right. The objective is to have people who use drugs no longer discriminated against, in which case you wouldn't need a special ombudsperson. But we're recognizing right now there's extensive stigma and discrimination and ignorance within the system. So this would be someone who would help support get past, or at least expose it. If they're not remedying it, at least expose it in a really public way, right?
So ready to second the motion?
We got one more hand up.
Okay. One more hand in the back.
Become the next ombudsman for drug-related people. Like, what do I have to do?
Well, I did a lot of research on what an ombudsperson is, and they're often given a status as someone who's like a judge. They're able to compel people to testify or get information no one else can get at. So we're not sure exactly what it would look like, but we don't want to get tied up in a lot of red tape, but we want action. It's shocking how sometimes a very little action could cause a great impact. When we first started Vandu Up, there were 2,000 people on methadone in this province, and there's, what, 30,000 now or 20? Like, I don't know, fucking lots. But in those days, you had to piss. If you pissed dirty, they cut you off methadone, and they were killing people with this. We had a high number of overdoses in the 90s. After a while, we just started phoning the College of Physicians and Surgeons Opiate Committee, and there was enough menacing threat in our voice that we were going to go public with this shit. So, so some woman comes in, she goes, my methadone doctor cut me off, blah, 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 big complaint. And I said, oh yeah, and she says, and then I told him, I'm telling Ann Livingston. And she said, and I said, well then what happened? And she said, he put me back on. So, and I'm nobody, you know what I mean? It's just like a bunch of, you can...
That's the idea. Somebody who's gonna not let this shit go. Like if somebody gets the shit beat out of them and all their money and drugs stolen by the police, which we know happens, somebody who's gonna believe them and investigate and make a complaint and not let it go. Because right now, that's getting swept under the rug every time, right? Like nobody believes the police actually steal dope and money from people who use drugs. No, I'm serious. Straight people do not believe that. Straight people don't believe, exactly. So we need somebody who would like follow through on those type of instances. I think we're not talking about like the hiring process. That's going to be what's in the action plan. Is that we would develop the demand. So that would include some ideas about like what the criteria for what we would see in that position would be. So this is going to be a thing that probably is going to come back to the next annual general meeting with more detail. But what we're trying to do is just get the process rolling. So I'm going to try to get some more.
Okay, I make a motion that we adopt the resolution for having an ombudsman.
I second the motion.
For what's been presented.
Do you want me to read it out again?
All in favor?
Just in terms of process, I'm going to quickly read out the motion again and then we'll call the vote. So, campaigns we need at a provincial level. Know Your Rights campaigns for drug users on policing, drug laws, sex work, homelessness, etc. Campaigns that highlight women who use drugs, particular experience, especially relating to children and child apprehension. Campaign for an ombudsperson for the rights of people who use drugs, who can see through complaints about police, hospitals, welfare, etc. Action plan is request pivot to produce know your rights materials for distribution to all local groups. Strike a women's committee for BC YUKON Association of Drug War Survivors to develop analysis and campaigns. Develop demands for the position of the ombudsperson and present these demands to the provincial government. So
Okay, so I made motion, who's gonna second it? Okay. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Any abstain? Motion passed.
So you don't take it.
Many of you may not realize we have these lovely volunteers. Please stand up. I don't know how many times they've been here, or, you know, they've got a little schedule, and they've been note-taking for us, and they don't use drugs. Thank you, thank you.
So the next resolution is going to be brought by Jack on experiential work.
Good afternoon, everybody. So forming an experiential harm reduction workers union. The summary from our group yesterday is the people who use drugs and work in harm reduction deserve to be paid for their expertise and doing work that is really difficult work, even if they do this work because they love it and they care about their community. Better wages need to be arranged in a way that people don't lose access to their disability benefits. People also need all the other supports unions fight for their workers. Vacation, sick leave, etc. We can negotiate for better wages because some of us already have. We need to learn from the organizations that have been the leaders like Vandu and Solid and support fledgling drug user organizations. There are a lot of enthusiasm for the idea of a union to represent harm reduction workers. So in the breakout group today, we voted to make a motion about it to the larger group today and vote on. There still are a lot of details to be worked out, what kind of model, how the finances will work, and so there will probably need to be a committee to take this forward. So what follows is our resolution and action plan coming out of our discussion. Our resolution would be to form an experiential harm reduction workers association of BC to set up provincial standards for wages, work conditions, benefits, and persons with disability earnings exemptions. 2, to support experiential harm reduction workers in local struggles to hold their workplaces to these standards. And 3, to build capacity to encourage and support direct experiential worker control over contracts and job sites wherever possible. So for our action plan, we would form an organizing committee that is representative of experiential workers from as many sectors as possible in BC to draft proposals and potential funding structures, to do a membership drive and plan a founding congress of BC Experiential Harm Reduction Workers Association, to produce worker-endorsed documents outlining provincial standards for wages, work conditions and benefits, and a person with disability earnings exemptions. 4, to work with employers and provincial funders for immediate renegotiation of all contracts to be in line with our wage, conditions, and benefits standards. And 5, work with the province to ensure adequate earnings exemptions for all experiential harm reduction work. And 6, build capacity within autonomous organizations of people who use drugs to win, appropriate, and renegotiate experiential work contracts as they may currently be held by other housing and service organizations.
Discussion on the resolution and action.
I have a question.
If we can mic it, we should.
Yeah, mic run if you can.
I just have a question about the PWD exemptions. If there is anything we can do as well for people on regular social assistance, have exemptions as harm reduction workers as well.
Well, what we've done to address that in our region is that pretty much all of our workers are disabled people. So if we find somebody who isn't on disability yet, but is on regular assistance, what we would do is we would use our peer support and peer navigation model that we use to get them on disability so that they can actually earn. In the meantime, while they were actually on welfare, I wouldn't pay them by a paycheck. I would pay them for stipend work, so that wouldn't affect your welfare as long as you ain't reporting that shit.
You're getting less than if you work it out, your stipend's $40 for 4 hours. You don't declare it at all. It's called a stipend. It's to cover expenses incurred while volunteering. On top of that, volunteering in that kind of way improves your health. So we've had health funding at Vandu, and there's been various little wars started with us that we needed to give people T4s, and we refused to do it. So just so you know, what is it called? North Shore Search and Rescue. They go and rescue people, and they say, please don't give us your gas receipts and your restaurant receipts. You get a per diem, it's a stipend, and they don't pay taxes on it. So we just want to be like everybody else who's doing heroic work.
Thanks, man.
No, it's just one of the ways you can protect people from having the stuff clawed back, which means that once you're paid wages, that's where we're really going to tackle this stuff here. Am I right?
That's right, because those of us who receive wages in Victoria, we're still all disabled people. You know, when this crisis comes to an end, there's no guarantee of what we're going to have for work. What kind of transferable skills. You know, I have a family to support children, so if I go back to just being PTSD me, you know, I still have my disability at the end of this, you know, so I think it's important. You know, I'm old enough to remember a time when social assistance was supposed to actually socially assist you back to a better place, you know? So that's what I'm hoping for. We're all disabled motherfuckers right now. Hopefully at the end of this, we all have enough skills to keep going, and maybe we don't need that, but if we do, it has to be there.
I think we form a union so we can decide how we want to relate to any welfare program, right? So we all together can tell them we want exemptions no matter what the welfare is, or we say we want a living fucking wage so that we never have to see a welfare worker again in our fucking lives. Yeah! That's what a union does.
I just wanted to, as a kind of point of discussion, and I totally agree with the resolution and the action plan, but I just wanted to acknowledge that for some drug user organizations, this is going to put us in a difficult situation because we're both receiving contracts to provide the services and our members are working in those same services. So we're both the employer and the employees in the same organization. So I don't think that should stop us from advancing with this and making sure that all of those people are reasonably paid, but just to acknowledge that in some organizations this is going to create a period of adjustment and organizational difficulty potentially.
Yeah, of course, I could see how this could end up where the people who are running drug use organizations here, let's say, why would a housing provider be paying you if you live in a housing provider? If we have a union of experiential people, they work for us. They don't work for the Portland Hotel. They don't work for the Lookout. They don't work for Rain City. They work within the places that they live, possibly. But I think that they've got a lot fair of a shake having a job where their boss is a person with lived experience. Their boss ain't the housing manager of whatever fucking housing unit you live in.
Yeah, I think that there's been some discussion in the group too, is how do we not fuck up what we've already won by doing this? And so I think the key is to start with the organizations where half of the people in those organizations are already union members. So the provincial government has such organizations where their people are paid well and they're union members. And PHS has something like that. So if we form a union and go to those employers, they kind of have to start to recognize us, or else they're taking a really nasty public double standard against drug users. We start with them, and we work our way through the system, I think, starting with where the millions and millions of dollars are, and working our way down to the Vandus of the world, where we can find ways where we're not going to be in a position to go on a general strike across BC on day one. I think that we want to bring people together and slowly work the employees, but this is the kind of thing that the resolution will empower the organization here to figure out over the next year, I think.
You got a question, Perry?
Actually, your brother makes a really good point though, right? Like, unions help to protect against arbitrary firing. Right, so when you get a union, you can't just have a nasty boss that's having a bad day and fires your ass in an afternoon, or deschedules you at work. At my table, we heard about people who got,
Unscheduled.
one brother was saying he got descheduled instead of getting fired, right?
I went from 5 days a week down to 2 days now.
And also, this is why we're gonna get sick days in our contracts too, right? Like this way.
Okay, so we're taking questions, so let's go here.
I got a question right here first, Prairie. Prairie's got her hand up for a long time.
I was just gonna say, Garth, what you said about like a way to get started, one thing that I have been learning about unions is that if you are in a unionized workplace, if you're unionized, the people you contract with actually are eligible to join that union, even if they're not your employees. So if you're in an agency and you contract with those people regularly, they're actually eligible to join that union. So that might be a really good way to start.
As Sustain's been trying to figure out our own internal structure and whatnot, we did a little bit of research on leadership techniques, and we watched this one TED Talk on leadership, and in it, a guy used an example of a car company, I think it was, that had a no termination due to job performance policy. Nobody could be fired there for not being good enough at their job. Instead, they received support. And when they had a slash in their sales or whatever, and they needed to come up with $10 million or something, instead of laying anybody off, what they did is they decided everybody had to take 3 weeks mandatory vacation, unpaid vacation. Or no, yeah, unpaid. And they could arrange that however they wanted and whatnot, but then they saw a $20 million increase in profits, company profits as a result of that.
Look at how labor unions organize. They don't start shit until they know they can win it, right? If you're smart, right? Like so if Unite Here is organizing in a hotel, they don't go and wave a flag saying I'm from Unite Here and we're organizing this hotel. They send organizers into the cafeteria to talk to workers. They form an organizing committee. They make sure they're talking to all the workers in the hotel. They make sure they've got all those union cards signed, and then they take on the hotel. So it's about organizing and being strong, not just going off half-cocked.
Okay, and then so what we've done to address the immediate problem that we came across within the PHS, for example, is we are the coordinators of the peer work that happens in the building. The PHS still runs their clean teams, the guys who go and clean the garbage off the block around their buildings, but all the actual experiential harm reduction work working in the bang room, any of the other outreach that happens in the buildings, we took a contract from the PHS to coordinate those services for them, so that we're like a buffer in between. If you need something from the housing manager that you hate because you live in the building, then we talk, right? And then somebody who has a relationship with the building manager goes out and lays what that is. And also we have specific contracts with them to make sure that we have self-determination with the peer population and can try to bring their concerns forward to the PHS. So it's like a half measure in the meantime until we can do this.
Is that in Victoria or?
Yeah, that's in Victoria, the Johnson Street building.
You're much further there than we are here.
Yeah, oh, totally. And then for example, the Portland Hotel owns also a treatment facility there in Victoria. So just like Bantu, we run a cannabis substitution program, and we've been able to migrate that into their treatment center because of the relationship we built with them in their Johnson building. So we can actually go up and distribute cannabis and take information about how benefits of people living in a treatment center while they're living in a treatment center. So that's the advantage of sometimes working with people who may be your enemy.
Where we are here is I've taken them to Human Rights Commission, and it's coming down the pike very soon. We're going to go to trial.
I got a speakers list that I got, so I'll come back to you, but I got to take the people who have been.
Okay.
So you there?
There's actually a Binners Union Does anybody know about that?
I've heard about that.
There's a big money, so if they can form a union, we can do it.
Gotta talk really loud, next remember.
Yell at me, bro.
Legitimize the idea of cares as an occupation listed with other, essential service cares like paramedics or whatever, so that it's just be like official with the government as an occupation.
What we call that in Victoria is working in an interdisciplinary team, right? Like, so you may have somebody like AIDS Vancouver Island who's been doing harm reduction work for 15 to 20 years, but they only have a bunch of straight people who work for them, So what do? You take the peer workers like us and we go on a team with those more experienced harm reduction workers who have a hard time reaching people because they actually don't know where we are. So we work on the team together, and then we do work alongside, community enforcement, law enforcement, university research, all those things, because we play a part in an interdisciplinary team. I think we have a union put together. We could take the model we have and expand that into a provincial situation.
Every time somebody gets an award, like paramedics or firefighters or cops or something, great job in the overdose crisis, guys. We know you're really putting your life. Half of this room is like, oh fuck, I'm not recognized. Where's my PTSD and mental health support? Where's my special day off and spa day because it's been so hard? None of that for us, right? Well, the union actually would raise us to the same standing. A union would actually put us as recognized professionals in the same way that all the so-called first responders that are, got a uniform and stuff like that right out there are getting that recognition now. And that's been a demand from people who've been on the front line of the overdose crisis as harm reduction workers for years now, is we need the same kind of supports that they do. So to Nicholas's question, like how do we get that on parity? We actually have to demand it and ask for it, and we have to do it collectively, and that's what a union is.
We identified the major barriers in local drug organizing as funding, space, and stigma and bigotry from local institutions and individuals. And then we brainstormed what a provincial drug user organization could do to support the emergence and development of local grassroots and democratic organizations of people who use drugs. So the things that we brainstormed were to provide seed money for groups that are just getting off the ground, for things like stipends, space rental, and photocopying when you're just trying to pull together a core of drug users in the community that you're organizing in. Help in securing regular multi-year funding so groups aren't constantly scrambling for grants. So we know that part of the shitty dynamics can be if you just get funding for the next 6 months and then you spend that whole 6 months trying to figure out how you're gonna get money for the next 6 months and you never get to really get stable. So we need mentorship and support from the provincial group about how to make sure that health authorities in particular are providing stable multi-year funding for drug user groups, which we know is happening in some places in the province, right? So it's not impossible. Institutional support, such as lawyers, when groups are discriminated against and especially denied use of space. So we heard that in a lot of places, drug users can't even get a space to meet because as soon as they walk through the door, they're getting confronted with that stigma and discrimination. And even if you have money, you can't rent a space to meet. So we need to be able to threaten those places who are displaying that discriminatory behavior that you're gonna get sued or you're gonna get a human rights complaint. And the PWUD human rights complaint against the Aquilinis is a potential kind of model case that we can use in pushing that in other areas. We talked a bit about the institutional backing of a recognized group. So again, this is dealing with stigma and discrimination. If there's a provincial group that has good printed materials and a website and a name that's known throughout the province, then that gives you a little bit of organizational traction when you're first getting off the ground. Financial infrastructure so that it can be an agency of reckoning with for local groups. So if we do have a provincial group that's funded and has its own bank account and has its own books that are audited regularly and can be shown to be responsible, then that group can hold money for local groups so they don't have to at least in the initial period, have all that infrastructure up and running. We talked about plain language accessible materials on how to organize a local group. So maybe even like a wiki on how to organize a drug user group that people could contribute to. And a venue and structure for mediation between local groups when conflict emerges. So we know that there can be conflicts that emerge and there's complaints that come from local drug users against the group in their area, and it might be substantive or it might be something pretty unsubstantive, but it's good to have some kind of process and oversight so that there's an outside body that they can go to when there's a conflict. So our action plan, the proposed action plan is actually pretty simple because a lot of this stuff, most of this stuff honestly is predicated on having a funded provincial group, which we don't currently have. So the real first step is to try to get funding for the BC YUKON Association of Drug War Survivors so that we can provide the local group, support for the local groups and province-wide infrastructure. And we've had previous discussions. I think there was one referenced yesterday with the OERC, the Overdose Emergency Response Center. And there was some signaling that there was actually money available for a provincial drug users group, and Alexis Crabtree, who's not here anymore but wrote up a proposal with a pretty significant, I think like $900,000 a year budget. And there was some sense that that's not impossible, that it's actually being considered, but we need to push, and I think when we push, we need to have unity, and we need to show that there's drug users across the province who are pushing for this. That's going to give us a lot more strength. So we need to pursue the funding, and we need to, in order to do that, we need to set up and mobilize for meetings with the OERC, Ministry of Health, Mental Health and Addictions, whoever we need to meet with in order to push and pressure for that money. So those are the major action items, is just continue to try to push to get the provincial group funded so that we can provide that support to the local groups.